Hi, my name is Catherine, and I will be presenting my action research, which will focus on the reluctant learner and student engagement. In this slide, I will be discussing my problem statement. So during my past two placements, I had the opportunity to learn and adapt to two completely different teaching styles. My first placement had an associate teacher that taught in the traditional way, and my second placement had an associate teacher who taught in a more innovative way, where she tried to engage the 21st century learner. So within both placements, I had experience teaching reluctant learners that weren't as engaged as their peers due to their lack of interest in the units. This may be due to how the lessons being executed, the topic of the unit, and most common, the lack of integration of popular culture. So for my action research, I am interested in learning the effectiveness of creating more personal assessment pieces to better understand a student's interest in order to increase their engagement. To achieve this, I plan on focusing on the specific learning skills, collaboration, and initiative. So going off on my problem statement, I decided on the following research question. When faced with reluctant learners, is it possible that integrating personal assessment pieces, for example, questionnaires, surveys, and exit cards, to learn about students' interests can increase student engagement? The following values will be considered in this action research. The first one is commitment to students and student learning, and the second one would be inclusivity and respecting diversity. These two values are the core of the research question since it considers the unique individual students. So this can relate to race, religion, student interests, and their learning style, as well as implementing a variety of strategies to increase their engagement and create a positive learning environment. The following terms will play as the backbone to my action research. The first one is commitment to students and student learning. So according to OCT, members are dedicated in their care and commitment to students. They treat students equitably and with respect and are sensitive to factors that influence individual student learning. The second one will be inclusivity. It aims towards enabling teachers and learners both to feel comfortable with diversity and see it as a challenge and enrichment of the learning environment rather than a problem. Lastly, it would be student engagement. So it's been built around the hopeful goal of enhancing all students' abilities to learn how to become or how to learn to become lifelong learners in a knowledge-based society. Moving on, we will be looking at the literature and annotated bibliography that helped support my research. The first source I explored was called Guidelines for Inclusion, written by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. So the text focuses on how excluded students are planned for in education. It's broken down to three parts. The first is the framework, second, practical changes at the school level, and third, tools for education plans. In this text, the writers aim to debunk the ideas surrounding inclusion and discuss the challenges that can be overcome through an educator's willingness to change his or her attitude. The text does mention some important recommendations for student success, and it also includes avoiding necessary repetition, especially if it isn't as successful during the first try. And it also talks about encouraging students to accept change and emphasizes on the importance of the learning goals and make real-world connections in order to include the student and have them be more engaged. The second source I explored is called Strengthening Student Engagement. What do students want? This is written by authors Strong, Silver, and Robinson. So the text focuses on how an educator can increase a student's motivation to learn. Strong and fellow authors introduce a framework called SCORE, where it's believed that students are driven by success, curiosity, originality, relationships, and energy. By implementing the SCORE, students will feel more confident in their learning. In addition to this, Strong and other authors discuss the importance of knowing SCORE, so conditions, self-expression, relationships, etc., and how it can be used to convince students to succeed. As mentioned in the study, an educator can articulate the success criteria, model the skills needed to be successful, and arouse curiosity within the student. My third source is called Improving Student Engagement, written by Taylor and Parsons. So in this article, Taylor and Parsons discuss the key factors in increasing student engagement, which is interaction, exploration, relevancy, technology, and challenge. By identifying these factors, the authors are able to guide educators on how to use these elements to enrich a student's education while keeping them both engaged and successful. In addition to this, the authors place a strong emphasis on the importance of assessment for learning, where students should be able to co-create success criteria with their teachers to understand their criteria of powerful work and use it to guide their own learning both in school and beyond. For my fourth source, I explored the Handbook of Research on Student Engagement. So in this article, the authors go through a variety of factors that influence a student's engagement in their learning environment. As noted by the authors, this includes parental influence and student motivation. When going through each influencing factor, the authors provide a guide of how to overcome these challenges. In their guide, the authors discuss the importance of relationships, which is with the student and parent, and integrating interest into their learning. In addition to providing a guide for educators, the authors discuss the meaning of student engagement and why it matters in the classroom and their learning. For my fifth source, I explored a really interesting resource that was based in Australia, but I felt that it could really apply in the Ontario classroom. It's called Engaging Students Creating Classrooms, written by Goss and Sonneman. So in this report, Goss and Sonneman talk about the importance of creating the right classroom environment for learning. This includes some of the factors: developing a report, creating routine, and challenging students to take risks and participate. The report focuses on the classroom in Australia. However, the strategies can be used in the Canadian classroom. The report focuses on the current focus on disciplining student behavior and the need to shift the focus on making student learning more engaging to change behavior for the better. The final source that I explored is called Questioning Strategies to Engage Students, written by Northern Illinois University. So in this article written by Northern Illinois University, the authors provide different questioning strategies to further engage students. Some strategies include avoiding questions that are not related to the course content, being responsive to students' answers, and achieve a rhythm of series of questions so that the discussion can end in one large understanding. The article provides other tips such as timing of questions and which type of questions to ask during each suggested time. All the explored sources helped me to engage the students in the classroom, build a rapport with the class, and also ensure that the classroom was inclusive. So all the reviewed articles discuss the importance of student engagement on one's learning environment, and most importantly, how to promote it in the classroom. The authors have all discussed why student engagement should be prominent in the classroom and the different strategies one can adopt in order to successfully execute it. There are many ways one can increase student engagement. In Goss and Sonneman's article, the writers discuss the importance of building rapport and maintaining a routine, which is something I hope to implement in the classroom during my practicum. In Handbook of Research on Student Engagement, the authors discuss the importance of building a relationship with the student's parents to grasp a better understanding of the student's interests so that the educator can integrate it into the lessons. In the articles, I found a few commonalities that help focus my action research. So this included integrating a student's interest in order to increase student engagement. This point played as my backbone for my action research. Also, to achieve this, it's important to ensure that there is a positive relationship between you and the student and you and the parent so that learning can go beyond the classroom. Third, there's also an increase of use of technology considering the students are 21st century learners. Also, constantly motivating students to succeed. Lastly, there's a focus on a student's learning style. It's important to encourage choice in assessment so that students can be successful. So by focusing on these elements to increase student engagement, I believe I can achieve a learning environment where students feel motivated, interested, and happy with their learning. Using exit cards, self-assessment, and surveys and questionnaires will help me better understand the interests of these students as well as their preferred way of learning. By truly understanding each student as an individual, I believe student engagement can be easily achieved. By combining all the methods discussed in each resource and implementing it into the classroom, I believe student engagement will be increased by a significant amount. As a result, motivation to learn will increase and classroom behavior will be better. Moving on, I will be talking about my research action plans and the strategies I use to execute it into the classroom. In this slide, I will be discussing the data sources I use for my research action plan. So the first one is structured observation, surveys and questionnaires, checklists, and anecdotal records. So I use surveys and questionnaires because I believe this data source will be the most effective source to better understanding students' personal interests, likes, and dislikes. This can be used at the beginning of the practicum where students can share what they personally like and what works best for them. When the practicum reaches its midpoint, students can be given another survey or questionnaire to reflect on the methods which were used to enhance their learning experience. They can share on what has worked for them so far, what they find enjoyable, what can be improved, and what doesn't work. Next would be the checklist. I believe this data source is easiest to use and is the least time consuming. It can be done while students are completing a task or use it to reflect on their completed product. This can be used as a way to see if a student is engaged or not. Next is the anecdotal record. I believe this to be the most time-consuming data source, but it is also effective. Anecdotal records can be used during all aspects of a lesson. It's also more descriptive than a checklist. In addition to this, the anecdotal record can be used as a way for me to reflect on what was successful and what are the areas of improvement. To ensure validity and reliability, I use a variety of data sources to ensure that there was an increase of student engagement in the classroom. Because I use a variety of sources, it helped me establish triangulation of the data I obtained. I created a survey for students where they could share their likes, dislikes, and things they are okay with, but could be modified to make the learning experience more engaging. I used the red, yellow, and green light method where the red had students demonstrate their dislikes, yellow, they wrote down what they were okay with, but it could be modified, and green, something that they did like, to outline for students to follow. So once my data was collected, I had a class discussion where students were to share why they disliked a certain teaching strategy and what could be done to make it more enjoyable for them. I found this to be really helpful because the students were given a voice and they were extremely engaged in the class discussion. In addition to the survey, I used anecdotal records after a lesson was completed. This was used to log and reflect on whether an aspect of a lesson was successful, how the students felt when it was being done, and what could be modified to make it more effective. I also used the students' product to better understand how engaged the students were during the activity. I found that when they were less engaged, the product was messy or rushed. When students were more engaged, the product was significantly better, and the students demonstrated their understanding by outlining each step and ensuring their answer was correct. In this slide, I further explore the data resources that I use. So it discusses the what, so which one I used, why I used it, who was involved, when it was used, and how I used it. My anecdotal records of my classroom observations were collected twice a week between February and April. My checklists were collected once a week for each lesson between February to April. Also, my questionnaires and quizzes were done at the beginning of February and March. When implementing an action research plan, it's important to consider the school procedures. An educator must take the following into consideration. A, do you have permission from the school board to conduct research? B, are the students' parents aware and do they have their permission? C, are the students providing consent to participate in your research? And D, how can you ensure the students in your research remain confidential? Completing the action research was extremely rewarding for me, especially for someone who is continuously trying to learn and take on challenges to better myself as an educator. The research plan allowed me to critically think of problems in the classroom and find a variety of methods to resolve these issues. This allowed me to better understand my students despite having some strategies to increase student engagement fail. Due to the fact that the class was intermediate level and all students have realized their strengths and areas of improvement, as well as their favorite and most disliked subjects, it was difficult but rewarding to find ways to make the subjects they disliked more engaging for them. By implementing my strategies of distributing surveys, questionnaires, exit cards, and most importantly, building a rapport with each student, I was able to see the class progressively become more engaged and confident in their learning. Students became more determined to complete a task successfully and became better collaborators with their peers.